You start a hard conversation. Somewhere in the first 5 minutes, something shifts. One of you goes quiet, or the volume rises, or one person starts talking faster and the other stops responding entirely. By the time you try to come back to it, you're not sure what the conversation was even about anymore. What happened is not a communication failure, it is a nervous system event. Once you understand that distinction, the whole thing looks different. I'm Dr. Shae. Today I'm going to show you what flooding is, how it shuts down every communication skill you've developed, and what co-regulation actually looks like between two partners who want to finish the conversations that matter. I'll tell you how you and V's story ends. First, why good communication skills weren't enough. Diffuse physiological arousal. What Gottman calls emotional flooding describes what happens when physiological arousal during conflict rises above a threshold where productive conversation becomes neurologically impossible. Your heart rate goes above approximately 100 beats per minute. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for nuanced language, empathy, and regulated response, loses access. What fills the gap are older, faster responses: defense, withdrawal, attack, shutdown. This is not weakness, this is biology, and it happens to everyone, including people who are excellent communicators in every other context. The reason smart, articulate, emotionally aware people still cannot get through hard conversations is not that they lack the words. It is that their nervous system crossed the flooding threshold before the words could be used. So what actually decides who crosses that threshold first, and how fast? Two things, and both are faster than most people expect. The first is the speed of escalation, the rate at which the conversation goes from neutral to charged. Couples with well-practiced conflict patterns can cross the flooding threshold within 90 seconds of the conversation starting. The second is unresolved activation from prior ruptures. If the last hard conversation didn't fully resolve, your nervous system arrives at the next one already partially aroused, with a lower threshold to cross. That's the mechanism. Here's what it looked like for two people who already knew all the right words. U and V described themselves as good communicators, and mostly they were right. In everyday life, they were warm, articulate, emotionally present with each other. Friends asked them for relationship advice. But there were 3 topics they could not finish. Not because they hadn't tried. They had tried, repeatedly, with increasing deliberateness. They'd read about communication. They knew the frameworks. They used I statements. They tried to listen before responding. They had, by any reasonable measure, done the work. None of it worked once the conversation reached a certain temperature. What they hadn't understood was that their communication skills were operating above the flooding threshold, which meant those skills were not actually available to them at the moment they needed them most. The skills were real, they just weren't reachable. V's flooding response was withdrawal. When the threshold was crossed, V went quiet. Answers became shorter. Eye contact disappeared. From V's perspective, protecting the conversation from escalation, buying time to not say something damaging. From U's perspective, abandonment. Evidence that V didn't care enough to stay in it. U's flooding response was acceleration. More words, higher urgency, louder. From U's perspective, trying harder to be heard, closing the distance V was creating. From V's perspective, confirmation that staying present would only make things worse. Each response activated the other's flooding faster. Neither one was doing anything wrong, exactly. They had simply built an escalation loop neither of them understood, with each person's coping strategy functioning as the other person's trigger. Here's the question worth sitting with. Not about you and V, about you. When a hard conversation gets too loud or too quiet too fast, which one are you? Do you get louder, faster, more urgent? Or do you go still, go quiet, disappear from your own face mid-sentence? That answer is the first thing your partner needs to know about you that has nothing to do with what you're actually fighting about. Co-regulation is the answer, and it's different from self-regulation, which is what most communication advice focuses on. Self-regulation means managing your own nervous system state, breathing, grounding, taking space. Useful, but it requires you to notice you're flooding before you're too far gone, which under genuine activation is harder than it sounds. Most flooding advice assumes a level of self-awareness that flooding itself removes. Co-regulation is what happens when two nervous systems regulate each other. It's the mechanism behind why a regulated partner can bring an activated partner back, not through words, but through physiological signals, tone of voice, pacing, physical presence, eye contact. The body responds to another body's calm before the mind has caught up. This is why the repair attempt matters so much. A repair attempt is any behavior that interrupts the escalation and signals, I am not your enemy. I want to come back. It can be a word, a gesture, a pause, a change in tone. What makes it land is not the content. It's the nervous system state of the person offering it. A flooded partner cannot deliver a repair attempt that co-regulates because the signal has to come from a state they are not currently in. One more layer, worth naming before you commit to a fix. The way you fight is not a character flaw. It's a self-protection strategy learned in the first conflict environment you ever navigated, which was usually your family of origin. Whether you accelerate or withdraw, that pattern almost certainly predates this relationship by decades. When you understand your flooding response as a protection strategy rather than a personality trait, you can have a different relationship to it. Not eliminate it. Flooding is physiological, not optional. But name it. Give your partner a map of what it looks like when it's happening and what actually helps versus what makes it worse. Here's what I hear from couples frustrated with this material. We've tried taking breaks. We've tried the 20-minute rule. We come back and it's exactly where we left it. The break is necessary. It is not by itself co-regulation. If you spend those 20 minutes replaying the conversation, rehearsing your next point, building your case, your nervous system hasn't downregulated. You've returned to a conversation with two activated partners, each more certain they were right. The break works when it's genuinely deactivating. Exercise, something absorbing, not the conversation. Then you return, not to continue the argument, but to re-establish connection first. Have this conversation in a calm moment. When I'm flooding, what does it look like? What helps me come back? What makes it worse? Give your partner the map before the next hard conversation requires them to navigate without one. You and V built a flooding protocol, not communication rules, a physiological agreement. V would signal flooding with a specific phrase rather than going silent. You would hear that as a request for a regulated pause, not withdrawal. The three topics they couldn't finish became conversations they could complete. The skills had always been there. Their nervous systems finally had a structure to use them in. The Blueprint Compatibility Assessment covers communication patterns as one of its 5 domains. Link in the description. The workshop series practices co-regulation sequences live. Love connects you. The blueprint protects you.